Hello everyone, in today's video we're going to be continuing our short series on the Airbus A320 V2, and we're going to be handling kind of the climb out as well as sort of the cruise phase, as well as handling some of the systems, as well as kind of how to play with waypoints a little bit on the FMS. Let's go ahead and get started. So first things first, if you've seen the previous videos, you saw how we got ourselves up in the air here. This is a different day. As you can see, the weather has gotten definitely better than it was previously, which is kind of nice. It's nice. Like I said, it's kind of a nice, crisp fall day kind of a thing. We have not nearly as many clouds as we had the other day. So right now we're cruising up, and we've crossed 18,000 feet a few minutes ago, and you probably observe the fact that you have this little thing at the bottom flashing at you with a QNH, one of the standard procedures, depending on what country you're, if you're in Europe or in the US. What you have to do is actually switch over your altimeter to a standard setting once you cross a specific altitude. For us in the US, it's 18,000 feet, and that's why it's flashing at us. What it's simply doing is saying, hey, did you mean to put this on standard? Now, one of the cool things is if you look real carefully at the altimeter here, you'll notice this is pull standard. So if I honk this by pulling it out like that, it'll automatically snap it to standard mode. That doesn't mean that we've manually set it. It just means we put it to 29.92, and we're basically kind of on our way, sort of a thing like that. Now, as we climb, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the different autopilot features and functions and kind of play around a little bit. So what you'll observe right now is this computer is completely in control of everything going on. You'll notice that we have speed is managed. You'll notice our roll program is managed. You'll notice we have heading and vertical speed. You also notice that my altitude has been pre-selected for 35,000 feet, and level change is all managed automatically. The reason those items are very, very important is because right now, if I take a nap, this thing is going to keep on climbing right up to its cruise altitude and is going to basically be hanging out exactly the way I want. Now, there's something else we need to kind of keep in mind. And if I go ahead and float my head down here, you'll observe that my throttle is chilling here on the climb detent. And now the reason it's on the climb detent, obviously, is because it's on climb. Now, one of the things that makes this very different from a Boeing aircraft is the fact that these detents are basically what's going to be selecting my desired auto throttle setting, not my manual throttle setting. Now, the reason that's so weird for folks is I don't have to touch the throttle until I pull it back to slow the airplane down during landing. That's just one of those kind of fun little features that kind of surprise people. Now, I like the fact that they have the big fat auto throttle disconnect button right there. I have one of those on my joystick too for that exact purpose if I need manual thrust immediately and I don't want to fiddle. Now, the reason this is so fascinating with this particular throttle system is if I were to go ahead and take the throttle and push it up to MCT, you'll actually see it'll snap to that position automatically. And when it does that, if you look up at my power, you'll probably notice max continuous thrust right now is 91.1%. And you can see over here that it's going to start hollering at me saying, did you mean to put it on climb position? And the answer is, yeah, we did mean to leave it on climb position. Only on account of the fact that climb and continuous thrust at this particular setting and this particular altitude are going to be about the same engine power. So it's not going to make that big of a difference for us. Obviously, we can always switch it to manual if we need and go ahead and do it that way. But that's just not something that we need to worry about too much. Next thing we usually do when we're on our way up, other than dealing with altimeter as well as this, is we have to deal with changes to our route. One of the things that you'll see from time to time is you'll get a request from air traffic control to basically go directly to a specific coordinate. Now, if I come down here, before I go doing that business, you see this little arrow right here? This arrow is going to signify the top of climb for us. And you can see it's a little ways away, not too bad. And one of the things I like to do when I'm cruising too, and you've probably seen this before if you followed with us since the beginning, is you know that I like to go ahead and dial in my views here so that it's about 80 miles on this side. I usually like to do 40 miles on this side, which you can do opposite too, is set this one to be kind of the close in and set this one kind of to be the long in. The advantage of that is you can kind of see what's coming in a few minutes and you can kind of see what's coming in the next 2 minutes, kind of a thing like that. Makes it a little bit easier if that's something you wanted to do. So as you can see, in a few minutes, we're going to be crossing that top of climb. But let's say we got a call from our good friends over at Air Traffic Control. They said, you can proceed direct to the next waypoint. So, of course, they wouldn't do that in the real world. They'd say proceed direct, and they'd give you the actual waypoint. But for us, let's go ahead and pretend they told us to proceed to the next waypoint. Now, the current waypoint is something called Donald. We'll be up to that in a few minutes there. And, of course, actually less than that, about 30 seconds away. And we don't want to go there. Instead, we want to go to the next waypoint. So I'm going to swing down here to my handy-dandy MCDU. The FMS system is what I would call it because I'm a Boeing guy. I come onto progress, and I can see clearly that, this is our recommended altitude. This is my report. This is all my accuracy and stuff like that. That's fine. But one of the things you'll notice under flight plan is my next position after top of climb is something called AJ Gajon. Now, of course, what we could do is we could dial this one in as our next waypoint immediately. The reason I'm waiting on that, though, is if you notice, we're about to cross Donald. So as soon as I start clicking buttons over here, it's going to immediately basically overwrite any work that I'm basically setting up. So I'll wait a moment for us to cross Donald as I kind of show this. But one of the things you'll notice as we cross this sucker is the fact that there is a button, see, there it goes, that says DIR, which refers to direct mode. Direct mode is going to go ahead and tell us to go ahead and pick a specific location. So now, for example, I wanted to head to Hetty. For all I have to do is press DIR, select Hetty, which is going to be this guy right here. And you'll notice it's expecting me to click this button. That's why it's got the little star. Now I'm going to go ahead and press this button right here. And what's going to happen is it's going to tell the FMS or the computer that, hey, I want to actually go to Hetty next. One of the things you'll probably observe is it automatically deleted everything that I had above this. Now, the reason that can be important is if you have very, very specific sequencing, like for an ILS or something like that, you've now gone and spoiled it, even though we're now proceeding direct to that new destination. Now let's go swing over here real quick and switch to a 160. And you can see now that Hetty is my next destination, followed by Selene, followed by Belt. Now, if I wanted to go direct Selene here, which would be kind of rude, it would go ahead and pick that one as well. So let's go ahead and do that together so you can kind of see what's going to happen. So I'm going to go direct one more time. I'm going to come down here to Selene, press that one. I'm going to go ahead and press that. And you'll notice immediately my aircraft is going to turn gently and it's auto-calculating what is required to get us over to that particular position, which is an important concept for us. Now, one of the cool things you probably observed is every single time I made an adjustment, you probably saw that my top of climb got tweaked a tiny bit each time. Now, the reason, of course, it got tweaked each time is because we had to recalculate all of those things as we were climbing. We're not to 35,000 feet yet. But one of the things you'll probably observe, which I find very, very interesting, is our top of descent is right after this waypoint called Selene, or Salin, I'm sure is the way they're going to pronounce it, kind of a thing like that. So let's go ahead and get to the top of our climb real quick, and I'll show you kind of the fun part. There we are, about 35,000 feet, flight level 35. And of course, since I kind of know where we are, 350. Is I can already see like your New Yorks and all that kind of off in the distance. We're basically going to be swinging up into Connecticut, which is way up there, kind of a thing. Now, what's kind of cool here is it took us quite a while and quite a bit of fuel to get to this altitude. And now that I'm looking up here, I can see my landing position is basically right there. And there's my top of descent. Now, one of the interesting things with an Airbus is when you're going to descend, you have to tell it that it's okay to descend. Now, there's going to be a couple different things we're going to have to do. Now, the first thing we're going to have to do is go to the altitude selector and select our bottom altitude. In this case, we're going all the way. So I'm going to come in here. I'm just going to dial in 2,500. You can swing the little controller right here and dial that in. And then we have to tell the Airbus that we want to start our descent. Now, just like you've seen everything else before, you will probably observe that our aircraft is starting its slow descent already. And if you take a look over here, is the computer has decided it is okay to descend. Now, let's say I said I don't want to do that right now. Let's say, as a matter of fact, I want to actually grab this. So I can actually pull this out. When I pull that out, what you're doing is ordering it to do what they call an open descent, which is get me down quickly. Now, if I pushed it in, you'll notice it goes back to a regular descent, in which case the computer is now going to decide when it's okay to begin the descent process. Now, the reason you have to kind of be careful with this, and I'm sure you observed this, is as soon as we started twisting this, you'll notice that we started our descent, even though we never hit our pre-calculated descent point. That is one of the fun things that you get to deal with an Airbus. Like I said, it depends on kind of how you have it arranged and organized, but it isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just something you have to be kind of mindful of. Now, one of the cool things, if I pop over to perf real quick, you will notice that we have a managed descent pre-selected for us. You'll see that it's basically sitting there. It's letting us know how much fuel we're going to have on board. And this is what it is attempting to get. And it's also giving us a heads up as to the distance. Now, the reason this doesn't work well for us, as you can probably observe, is this thing is going to very, very gingerly come down to 3,000 feet until it hits its next altitude constraint. Now, if we were to go to the flight plan real quick and actually zip down, you'll observe our next altitude constraint is 24,000 feet. So basically, we'd zip down to Belt and we'd chill there until it is time to basically start our next half of our descent. That's okay, of course, but keep in mind that, again, we started this process a little bit early, so it was going to be sitting here kind of chilling at this lower altitude, burning more fuel before we get to that point. Now, let's say we want to interrupt this descent. I love the fact that there's an expedite mode if you need to get it in a hurry. All we have to do is we have to pick a new altitude we want to go to. The other thing we can do is, do you see where it says push to level off? I can just click this by pushing in like that, and that will order the aircraft to immediately level off. Now, you'll notice now that I've pushed that button, you can see that this aircraft is not only leveling off at about 33, which isn't terribly good. You also notice that all the modes related to descent have now been overridden. you'll actually see quite awkwardly here. You can see alt is basically pre-selected. Vertical speed is essentially set to 0, saying I don't want to descend. You also notice I'm getting all sorts of fun warnings here, which is okay because I know that my fuel is relatively low. That's okay. I anticipated this. You can see we only got 6,300 pounds on here, but it gives you an idea of just how sensitive this aircraft can be once you get into certain situations like this. Now, our original calculated stop of descent was about right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and reactivate that open descent. Go ahead and snap that back like that. I'll pick my 2,500 feet like that. And then again, you're sitting here going, well, how do we fix this? How do we fix this? Well, remember, you push to let the computer do it. So I'm going to click, and you'll see the computer now has control over the descent. And you'll notice over here on my left that it switches back to that descent mode versus that open descent where basically we're trying to drop ourselves off the earth there. Let's go ahead and skip some time to get to that 24,000 constraint. You can see we're just about to belt, if you remember when we were getting ready for this one, that we were expecting to cross it at about flight level 245, which you'll notice because we have that computer-controlled descent, is that we're about 24,000 and we're just a few miles short of belt. The system's doing the best it can to try to get us at that point. One of the things worth noting too, and I probably confused everybody a little bit, is not all of these are set in stone constraints. You'll notice this little flight level business, and this 3,000 is definitely set specific for that point. But basically what we're going to do is we're going to continue our descent until we get a little bit closer and actually get ready for our landing. But the landing and all that fun setup is in the next video. Enjoy.